Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK Unlimited, we're going to be showing you how to install the etrailer.com base plate kit. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that it's going to work for you. So before we get too carried away, kind of checking out the base plate and seeing what it's about, I figured it'd be useful just to kind of refresh yourselves and touch base on the 5 main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Jeep down the road in the first place. All the main components are going to consist of 5 different parts. So the first thing is going to be your base plate, and what this is going to do is provide you with a solid and reliable connection point. That way you can hook your tow bar up. The tow bar is going to be the second component, and that's going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your Jeep to the back of your motorhome. The third main component will be safety cables, and those are pretty straightforward. Those are going to be there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. The fourth main component will be tow bar wiring, and what that's going to do is transfer the lighting signals from the back of your coach to the back of your Jeep, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system. And what that'll do is apply the brakes in your Jeep whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping bring you to a more predictable and complete stop. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and check out the base plate. So this is what it's going to look like whenever you're not hooked up to your motorhome. And I feel like that's important because chances are pretty good you're going to be, unhooked more than you are hooked up. And honestly, I don't think it looks too bad in terms of appearance goes. I mean, just about anything you put on a Jeep accessory-wise looks right at home. I feel like that holds true with this setup. There's a lot of base plates available. Some are a little less visible, some are completely visible. This one kind of falls in the middle, so got a bunch of different choices there. I do like the fact that they actually give you a bracket. That way you can mount up your wiring connector. So it takes a little bit of the guesswork out and, having to find different brackets and things like that. So it's a nice addition there. And they also give you some caps, some covers for the end of the base plate. So not only do I think it looks a little bit better, but it's going to help keep dirt and stuff like that out. I will say if you want to pick up a backup set, it seems pretty popular. A lot of people are doing that. We do offer these separately too, so it's always an option for you. One thing I definitely want to touch base on when it comes to these Jeeps is there's so many different submodels, and so many of them have different bumpers and things like that. That's going to affect what base plate will and won't work with your Jeep. So definitely use our fit guide and pay attention to that. If you have a different bumper or a special type of submodel, make sure to enter that in, and that way you can be certain that this base plate will actually work with your particular Jeep. Something that is really important when it comes to a flat tow setup is how easy it's going to be to hook up and disconnect. You don't want something that'll take up a bunch of your time and be confusing. This one's really easy to set up. Whenever you're ready to hook up to your motorhome, you're just going to remove the dust covers, put them in a place where you won't lose them. And this is going to use removable arms. Okay, so these are going to slide in, and you'll have these pins. You can kind of lock them in place. Same deal over here. So really not a whole lot to it. It's pretty hard to mess up. And now this will give you that connection point that you're going to need to hook up your tow bar. So this is going to work with those etrailer.com tow bars, as well as the Demco ones. Can also work with other manufacturers like Roadmaster, just to kind of give an example. That's a really popular brand of tow bars. If you have another brand like that, you can always pick up adapter ends. So you'll change the ends out, and that'll allow the tow bar to pair up with this particular base plate. So regardless what tow bar you have, chances are really good you're going to be able to make it work. And the safety chain openings as well. So that's what these are right here. So we kind of talked about those safety cables. Whenever you're ready to hook those up, now these are relatively open. So I have two common, very common ends of safety cables. Not going to have any issues getting to them. They're not in the way or anything like that.
Well, hey guys, we're here with Larry, who just brought his vehicle in and his motorhome, of course, to get a flat tow set up. So, Larry, you kind of mentioned before that you guys did have a trailer dolly, and that was always kind of a pain to mess with, wasn't it? Because it was kind of big, in the way, that kind of thing.
Correct.
Cool,
Moving
awesome.
it around, it was, yeah, kind of a pain.
Yeah, so this way, obviously, we're making that a lot easier for ourselves. Our tow bar is going to be folded up close to the vehicle, or the motorhome, I should say, making it a lot easier to storage, a lot easier to get out. And of course, when we start taking all this undone, our tabs aren't going to be as gaudy in the front. You know, we're not going to have, and of course, security is always a concern when we're doing anything like this. So nicer that it's a little bit more low-key, low profile, which is great. So have you ever flat towed before then, really? Not ever, really? Cool. So I mean, the concept's pretty simple, right? We're keeping it flat and we're towing it. That's, as the name suggests. What we're doing with that, basically, we're eliminating any of that kind of chucking that you might originally see from like dollies and stuff like that. Exactly right, because we're keeping it level, which is great. And these arms are going to be locking themselves in for us, and that way the car's going to be following right behind your motorhome. Okay. Especially compared to, like, it's a little different than a trailer. You know what I mean? You always kind of have to watch what it's going to be doing on the back end. This guy just tracks really nice behind the motorhome, makes it a lot easier to drive, especially pulling it in our kind of recreational areas. It's not going to be as a pain.
Do these always stay out, or do they, like
Yep.
a piston, articulate in and out?
So they are going to be locking in place for you, which is great. Now they are going to have a little bit of movement, but especially when you are going to be going to do, like, unlatch these guys, this is non-binding. If you compare that to like binding tow bars, basically what ends up happening with those guys is they have a little button that you have to push to release it. What's nice with these, they're not locked in right now because we haven't really pulled it forward, but I'm gonna be able to pull this lever back, pop it, and we're gonna feel that kind of give just like that. And that's basically unbinding itself, making it a lot easier to actually get it undone. So, and kind of talking about that, when we're doing our initial, like once we get everything set up, there are a few little kind of tips and tricks to keep in mind. So the first one's gonna be, as we are pulling out, luckily for us, we have a lot of little left and rights we're gonna have to make to get out of eTrailer here. However, say you're at like a campsite, you load it all up, you get it nice and even and lined up. That's also a really nice step that we're gonna go over of like getting it set up. But as we're taking off, we're gonna wanna do a little bit of left and right on our steering wheel. And what that's doing for us is actually making sure that these guys are extending their full. Because when it ends up happening, right, we're going along the highway, our Jeep's behind us. Yes, we're gonna be applying the brakes because we have that stay and play duo here, which is giving you that brake control, which is great. But what we don't want is one of these arms locking and one of them not. Because what can end up happening there is all that force gets transferred to one arm, and then that can end up bending your tow bar. So that's why we do that left to that right action, and we'll go over it later as we get in the motorhome as well. But that's because we want to make sure that we are distributing that force between both of the arms. Otherwise, you'd run into that issue that we were just talking about. So yeah.
It's probably important enough after you go a few miles that you should just pull over somewhere and come back here and look.
It's never a bad idea always to check, you know, but I think especially once you've done it twice, three times, you're going to feel it, and you're going to see it too if it's tracking well with you. And it's really not much. I mean, we're talking an eighth on the steering wheel, and all that's really doing is getting that extra little extension that we're looking for, because these are going to naturally extend as we pull. They're going to go to their max length, right? And it's just getting that lock almost in place. So, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a little. Hard to kind of show as we're at a standstill. Okay. But yeah, so why don't we go over a little bit of what we got working with us, right? Okay. So we have ourselves our tow bar actually. So this is the main component, right? You have the Falcon all-terrain here from Roadmaster, which is great. Again, we kind of mentioned it, it's non-binding. All that really is you're getting this lever action here, making it a lot easier to actually get those binds undone. Okay. Like I said before, there's usually a button there on the side, a real pain to get to, takes a lot of effort, and then you end up getting a lever anyways that you always kind of have to store somewhere. So the installers are always like, this is the way to go. So that's why we always throw people that way as well. And then we just have, of course, we have a base plate here inside the Jeep, and that's kind of giving us our tab extension that we're seeing here. So it's kind of underneath your bumper. And so we have our hook elements here. So our tow bars extend out, and then we're gonna have these little pins that are holding us in place. So, and then one thing that's great about our Falcon here, you do have all this wire housing and your safety cable housing. So a lot of times what you end up seeing is these safety cables just drag on the ground, or this umbilical cable drags on the ground, and that can lead to wear and tear. Eventually you gotta get them replaced, right? So what's nice about the Falcon, we're gonna be storing that inside here. That's not gonna be in the way. And then of course our safety cables on each side are for safety, right? If in case something goes wrong, we want to make sure our Jeep's not leaving, so we can undo those as well. And since we're just gonna be working right to left here, this is gonna be our breakaway switch. So if I were to pull this guy right now, we're gonna have, and if it was actually running, what ends up happening there, we're gonna have connection points that actually get made. And since there's nothing blocking that, that's gonna activate your brakes inside your Jeep. So worst case scenario, this thing comes undone, all the rest of the systems fail, you still have this breakaway switch, which is gonna activate your brakes. That way we're not hurting anybody on the road.
Okay.
That way everybody gets home safe, which is great. So always make sure we are replacing that. And there is just gonna be those two little tabs right there. You just gotta get those guys in place to actually work. Just like so. So making sure that's in place when you are taking
when you're driving it, you always leave that in.
Oh yeah, 100%. And even when you're not utilizing it, that's that mechanism. That's the fail-safe right there. Exactly. So we can keep that guy undone, and he can just kind of sit right here. And if you wanted to, you know, you can clip him anywhere. That way he doesn't go dangling anywhere you don't need him.
Okay.
So here's going to be your electrical hookup, right? And so you also have that, I think it's the Demco Stay and Play Duo. So this is basically getting you your brakes. This is getting you your brake control, which is great. And you also have the battery charge line kit, I believe, which is keeping our battery actually going, because we're still using that battery for our brakes, activating your actual stay and play as well.
Oh, okay.
So say you go for 6 to 8 hours on the road somewhere, you get back and now your Jeep's dead. That'd be no good. So that charge line kit is basically a trickle charger, utilizing your RV's power, maintaining your battery, and that way when you get to your campsite, you got no trouble and your Jeep's ready to go. So pretty simple there. How this guy works, you're gonna have this little notch here at the top. If you look on the inside, it's a little deceiving. So an easy way is just making sure that little tab right there is actually pointed up. And you just kind of want to work it out just like so, and then walk this guy back. I will say this guy can also kind of drag, so even like when you're done storing it, when we fold it up, getting it somewhere it can store, otherwise you can start, exactly. And just check that too each time. Like I kind of looked in there and there was just a little guy hanging on the edge. Make sure you brush that off, otherwise, you know what I mean, it can get stuck in there and then it takes way more time to get it undone, which can be a pain. So I'm just gonna undo the rest of these guys here then, and we can kind of walk through this setup together. How about that? And these guys are pretty simple. And one thing we can maybe talk about afterwards here too, I know you mentioned security was kind of a concern for you with a trailer dolly. One thing I might suggest too is getting some little locks here. So you can actually end up locking at least maybe one of your tow bars here or a second one. And the big one I would look at is maybe going to be a hitch lock here on your RV, because this
kind of like I've had one on the other one that took a key.
Yep.
That's
just
what
like
you're
that.
talking about.
Yep.
Okay.
And that way you're just getting a little bit of, I mean, any lock is only deterrent, but it does go a long way a lot of times of, you know, making sure everybody leaves your stuff where you have it. So yeah, and then I just want to bring these guys in up all the way, and we'll kind of walk over putting this guy up. Now for these guys as well, you could end up leaving them here. They have a little bit of a rattle to them. I would suggest pulling that pin, turning it, walk it right out, and that way you can store it either in your RV or your Jeep, and then this is what you end up looking with. So you don't really have anything too crazy. So you want to go ahead and take that guy out for me, and then we can maybe go in the reverse order of this guy. Sweet. So real simple. You know, they look harder than they are, and then you just slide them right in, turn them, and then replace that pin, and you're good to go.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then when our tow bar is not in use, we can kind of bring them together here, and we can bring them straight up. And then you're gonna have that little latch right there.
Okay.
Basically, you're just gonna walk that up just like so, then take it off to the side. And yeah, like I was telling your wife earlier, this is how it's gonna store. It's pretty nice because it's not really adding really too much length to your RV to begin with. And especially with that tow, like the Defender or that cover, becomes a great way of just protecting it on the back here, which is awesome. So one thing we always want to do though, when we are setting up our Jeep, you always want to make sure you have your emergency brake on. And what ends up happening with that, right here, we're on level ground, we're in a great spot. If you were to find yourself on a slight gradient, if you're in a driveway or something, all of a sudden we might get a little forgetful, and then we're catching our Jeep as it goes down. So
Understood.
you could probably get a little closer than we are too, obviously, right? Because these are going to extend out as we drive forward. So if you're having that trouble, just hop back in the Jeep, make sure your tow bar's out of the way, pull forward a little bit more, have the missus kind of tell you where you're at,
Put the brake back.
and then put the brake back on. So here, we're doing it in a controlled environment, of course. We got to make sure we are being safe as we're out on the road. So there's that little pin for you. Yep. There we go, and that's locked in. So now our bars are in place, which is great.
Do you normally, I went this way, do you normally, doesn't
It don't really matter. Wherever you really want it, whatever's easier for you to access would probably be the way I'd go about it. They're going to do the same either way. It's just I put mine on the outside because it's a little easier to get to rather than, you know, scrounge on the inside.
Understood.
And then we can go ahead and take our safety cables here. And that might be part of the determining factor too, right? If it's getting in the way of your clevises here, you might move it, but otherwise you're in a good spot. And then I'll let you take that guy in, and that's basically going to give us all our power.
This is the pins on top.
Yep. Make that little guy on top. And then you just kind of want to work it in. There you go. And as you get it into getting it out, it can be a little easier just to kind of double hook there.
Okay.
But just little tips and tricks. So.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're all hooked up now on here other than our breakaway. Awesome.
You just go usually under?
Just under, and then clip it to that guy. There we go, we're good to go. And kind of walking that guy back to here, what we've done is we've taken this guy right here and clipped it on. Sometimes people have trouble with their hitches. Yours was good enough to go ahead and just go around that tow hook, which is great. So we're not too worried about it. I like wrapping it here though, just because I know it's extra secure. And then this is what's gonna be pulling, not over here.
Okay.
So that's the only reason we did that. So yeah, so you're all hooked up now. Really, now what we got to do is actually hop inside the Jeep, and we're going to need to actually set this ready for tow mode. So why don't we grab your vehicle's owner's manual guide, and we'll do that really quick. Well, I showed Larry here how to get his Jeep actually set up for actually getting in the flat tow position, making sure we have no issues. Of course, let's always make sure we are using our own vehicle's owner's manual guide. That way, we're always being safe and sound out there on the roads. Larry, any last little questions you have for me or anything like that?
No,
awesome, cool. Well, he's also got the Demco Stay and Play Duo, so we're just making sure that that actually is activated inside the Jeep. We double check that with our sensors up front. And Larry here's ready to go and rock and roll, have some fun. So that's what we're all about. Well, thank you again, Larry. Appreciate it, and you have a good one.
Okay, I will.
But other than that, you know, when it comes to a base plate for a Jeep, you have a lot of different options, so that's a good thing. And this one's going to look good and function just as well. Now, as far as the installation goes, really wasn't too bad. Pretty straightforward. Just about anything on these Jeeps go together pretty easily. I will say this one was a little more challenging than some of the other brands of base plates that I've done. Just kind of tight to work with for a couple of steps, but definitely doable, and it really shouldn't take up a bunch of your time. But other than that, why don't we go ahead and get this installed together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Jeep, and we need to remove this plastic panel. So there's going to be a total of 6 fasteners, 4 in the front, 2 in the back. We'll go ahead and start with the 2 here on the back side of it. So if we look behind it, you can see one of the fasteners, and we're gonna have this just on each side. So you can take a trim tool or even a flathead screwdriver, simply pry underneath the head and work the whole fastener out. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing for this one over here as well. Here at the front, we're gonna have those 4 push pins. These are gonna be set up the same exact way as the 2 that we just took out. So go ahead and get these popped out. Once we get this last one off, the panel should come down. We'll lower it and set it off to the side. So now behind our back bumper, we actually need to get our bumper removed. So what you want to do is come to your fog light, unplug that, push down on the tab there and pull it out. And I want to mention from this point on, anything we do to one side of our Jeep, we're going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. But to get the bumper off, you're going to have a total of 8 nuts that you need to remove, so 4 on each side. So you're going to have 2 on the inside of the frame rail, 2 on the outside of the frame rail. These are going to be an 18 millimeter in size. So we'll go ahead and get all those removed. So with all the bolts removed, we can grab our bumper beam and start to remove it. And we're gonna have some brackets that may fall out. If they do, just hold on to them. And actually, it looks like we have some wiring back along through here that we're gonna have to pop off this here. So I'm just gonna put this back in for now, grab a tool and get that removed so we can pull this off with ease. So to get this off, I'm just prying off these little plastic fasteners here. And there's actually quite a few of them. But once I get all these off, it should release the bumper. And now we can set this off to the side, somewhere out of the way. So with the bumper out of the way, if you look at the face plates here, where our bumper actually bolted to, the top right hole, or the top hole here on the outside corner, will be a little bit smaller than the others. And so what we need to do is enlarge those to the size listed in the instructions. So I grab our bit here and we'll open it up. Once your hole's drilled out, since we have some bare metal now, I'm just going to take some spray paint. Just put a little layer over it just to help protect it against corrosion and things of that nature. Over here on the passenger side, if you look, we're going to have some wire loom that's connected to this part of the frame. That's going to be in the way when we go to put our base plate up, so I'm just going to take my pry tool, pop that out, and just kind of push our wiring back out of the way. Now at the next set of hands, you can take our base plate, and passenger side is going to kind of slide in first. Kind of do one of these deals. And to hold it roughly into position here, I'm just going to take a clamp and clamp it in. As long as your clamp doesn't fall apart like mine did here, shouldn't be too bad. So what I did, just to help keep everything lined up, is I took some pry bars and kind of put them through the holes, try to get everything straight and keep it that way. And then if you look on the side of your base plate, we're going to have a hole in it, and we're going to use that hole as a template to drill out through this frame piece here. And I'm using a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to drill through here, that way we get some hardware in. At this point, we can take our nut plate here, and what I like to do is grab the end of it with a pair of needle nose vice grips. It just makes it easier to kind of put into place. But a lot of times what can happen too, the nuts can have some powder coating on the threads and make it hard to kind of start. So run your bolt through and clean out the threads, makes it a little bit easier. This one was clean, so really no worries. But you're gonna take your bolt and a split lock washer, put that on. Take your flat washer, then we can take the included blue Loctite, put some of that on the threads, and matter of fact, all the hardware that we're going to use to secure the base plate is going to receive some of that Loctite. The way this is going to work though, nut plate, you're going to feed that up through here, and it lines up with that hole there, and we're going to line it up, take our bolt, and get it started. So once you have those in place and hand tight, come back with our socket. I'm using a 19, you can also use a 3/4, and we'll snug it down. Be sure to come back with a torque wrench and tighten down that hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can get one here at eTrailer, or a lot of times go to your local auto parts store. They'll have one there available you can rent. So once that's torqued down, go ahead and get rid of our clamp and our pry bar. So I went ahead and got our safety cables on, and as long as you have, you know, an end wrapped around your base plate and the other wrapped around part of your frame, you're going to be in good shape. So that's exactly what I did. And then here and there I use some zip ties just to kind of tighten everything up. That way this stuff isn't, you know, bouncing around, making a bunch of noise whenever we're going down the road. At this point, we're ready to get our bumper back on, but I just wanted to explain this while it's easy to see. So we have these backer plates that were originally on the back side of our bumper, and we're only going to be putting 2 of them back. One will go on the outside of our passenger side of our vehicle. The other one will go on the inside portion here on our driver's side. And reason being is, you know, the other sides have our base plate on the back there, so there's no need for an additional backer plate. But that said, we'll go ahead, get our bumper pushed into place, and get it resecured. So we'll grab our bumper beam here and make sure you get everything plugged back in. We'll line it up and slide it back into position. So I got our bumper resecured, tightened and torqued like we talked about. It did fight me a little bit. I do want to mention you may have to kind of move some things around. So in our case, our safety cables kind of looped around this side first, and that was interfering with the bumper. So I just changed them around, put them to the inside. Give us that clearance we need. And then on the very end, so I don't know if every Jeep will be set up like this, but on the very end there will be a screw on that silver part, just like this one here. And so you can use a Torx bit, I believe it was a T20, to pull those outside screws out, and that'll give you the clearance. And obviously this isn't going anywhere. It's pushed up so tight against our base plate, it's not going to hurt anything. So just a couple of pointers there if you run into some issues trying to get this thing lined up and put back in place. Those are some of the things to look for if it starts to fight you a little bit. At this point, what you can do is take your underbody panel. There's a diagram and the instructions that you can follow to cut out some of the parts and reinstall it the opposite way that you removed it. Or what we're going to do is hold off on that. We're going to actually install the rest of our flat towing components like wiring, braking system, things of that nature, because, you know, it's just going to give us a little bit more room to kind of work around without that panel down here. So that's what I'm going to do. Once we're finished up with that, we can come back to the panel, show you how to cut it and get it back up. So now that I have everything wrapped up in terms of, you know, my wiring, my braking system, and everything else, we can get our panel put back on. So there's a diagram and the instructions you can kind of lean on a little bit, but everyone's going to be set up a little bit different, especially depending on how you mount up your wiring and your breakaway switch and everything else. So what you can do is use that information, and what I like to do as well is kind of hold this up and eyeball it and just see where I need to make some cuts. You know, I'll cut some material out, test fit it. If you need to take more out, not a huge deal, we can. But we'll do that. It'll probably take us a couple tries to get it fitting just how we want it. With everything marked out, I'm gonna cut like we talked about. I'm gonna use a Dremel tool to cut this out. You could probably use, you know, a variety of different things, maybe a jigsaw or something like that. It's pretty thick plastic. So but with that said, I'll go ahead and work on getting all these cut out, and then we'll see if it fits. So went ahead and got our underbody panel back up in place, opposite way that we removed it. Like I said, you might have to kind of test fit it, make a, you know, another cut. I actually did have to do that over here where our base plate is on the driver's side, kind of sticks out a little bit. So kind of an opening there to clear it. Everything's tight, but this did go back up in place. And honestly, I think it looks pretty decent, you know, about as good as it can, given the fact that we have all these new components up front now. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the etrailer.com base plate kit on our 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK Unlimited.